they're all on the record. Yes. Okay. Chris Mittelstaedt again from FruitGuys, and I just wanted to clarify a point that I had made in response to the deputy director from the USDA, a point that he had made about the light brown apple moth about product coming out of New Zealand from foreign countries that are coming into the United States. He said were inspected for things like light brown apple moth. And as a follow-up to that statement, I just wanted to clarify that the point that I was trying to make is if the goal of moving product into foreign and domestic markets is the goal of the CDFA, that we're looking for just equality and parity. And the difference between the two, and to note, is that in New Zealand, if something is grown in an orchard and there is 1 or 2 light brown apple moth, that crop is not stopped from being exported, as it is here in the domestic market, where if there's 1 or 2 apple moth, that crop is stopped. So, as the example that I gave earlier, blue more organics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for holding this hearing this afternoon. Frank Ager, former 7th-term mayor of Fairfax and Marin County. I've served on local, state, and federal agencies, boards, and commissions for 46 years, including the California Coastal Commission and the Golden Gate National Recreation Area Board of Control. I currently serve on the Marin Sonoma Mosquito Vector Control District and the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority. The CDFA has been crying wolf over LBAM for 3 years. There has been no damage, none, to crops in California. The only damage has been to farmers by the unlawful quarantines placed on them by making it difficult to move products to market and even prohibit the movement of some ag products. When the government bases its decision to quarantine a crop on an incorrect and faulty premise, and it is not based on sound science, then that quarantine is unlawful. In 2008, the CDFA was telling us LBAM will destroy 250 crops, including grapes, apples, and cherries. We were told that LBAM would destroy coast redwoods. They said that there was an emergency. They said they had an aerial spray and the pheromone checkmate was safe. They held organic farmers hostage in 2007. If they agreed to be sprayed with checkmate, they would not lose their organic status. That's what they were told. The CDFA said that the inert ingredients were safe. As a result of Governor Schwarzenegger's releasing of the list of inert ingredients, the so-called secret ingredients, the public found out what the 11 inert ingredients were. One was a carcinogen, one a mutagen, one an endocrine disruptor, and TMAC. TMAC is a product that cannot be used on any crop whatsoever, be it organic or conventional. In a 2008 lawsuit filed in federal court in San Francisco against the EPA, the results were that checkmate, the safe pesticide, was pulled from the market for use against LBAM. The EPA reversed the emergency exemption. The final programmatic environmental impact report found no damage from LBAM. It would appear the CDFA is now trying to distance itself from its own EIR. The reason more farmers are not speaking out today is fear of reprisals from the CDFA. If they challenge the quarantines, next the state will begin inspecting their restrooms looking for ADA compliance. Farmers are suffering from the economic downturn, saying some may lose their farms, and the CDFA is piling on. The CDFA will continue to use aircraft to disperse irradiated lawns. They have not said they're not going to use aircraft to spray other pesticides. Only pheromones will be used will be dispersed early. I ask you to end the LBAM program as we know it today, lift the unlawful quarantines, and start over with a science-based programmatic environmental impact report. Again, Council has not said no aerial applications of other biopesticides or sterile insects, only pheromones. The print media continues to say LBAM will destroy up to 2,000 plants, and CDFA needs to put this to rest once and for all. Thank you very much, Senator.
Point of order, did you ask the CDFA to stay in case there were additional questions?
I assume that they would still be here. So maybe we start, we might want to start just, we don't want to round the CDF A up. Thank you. What did you say? So you might want to find them and call the department.
Good afternoon.
I know they're not in Mr. McAfee's booth, so let's make sure that they come back. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Cohan. I'm a clinical psychologist and a member of MOMAS, Mothers of Marin Against the Spray. MOMAS came together in 2008 to oppose the light brown apple moth aerial spray program. We represent more than 500 mothers and families in Marin County. Our mission is to reduce the level of environmental toxins and pesticides that children are exposed to provide a healthy, non-toxic environment for children. I wanted to address the topic of pesticide use and health impacts on children who are particularly vulnerable to pesticides. The literature is very clear that pesticide exposures are contributing to exponential increases in illnesses such as asthma and autism. Other health concerns associated with pesticide exposure include childhood cancers, infertility, ADD, Parkinson's, MS, multiple sclerosis, thyroid problems, and early puberty. The effects of pesticides can be multi-generational, whereas not just those who are exposed to the pesticides will be impacted, but their children or grandchildren. When we look at the pesticides planned by this program, we see that they are designed to create a chronic exposure to the chemicals that they emit over long periods of time. For example, when pesticide-laced twist ties are placed in trees in a yard where children are playing, they will be exposed on a regular basis to a cloud of chemicals. I think that what people need to understand is regardless of the mode of application of these pesticides, whether it's aerially or by trucks or backpack sprayers or twist ties, that the chemical exposure is still the same to children, and that people need to understand this. And the health impacts associated with this exposure will still be the same. Lastly, the pesticides planned by the Light Brown Apple Moth program are not adequately tested for human health impacts. The CDFA has kept the pesticide formulations secret because they're trade secrets. So I think that people are entitled to know what they're being sprayed with. In the EIR, I don't know if they've changed this since yesterday, but the EIR entitled them to come by force into people's property and, to cross over their fences and to spray their property without consent. So I think that this program is wrong, and MOMAS does not support this program. We would like to see it ended.
Let me ask you a question for you. So even the twist ties, you're very concerned about the transparency of information and the safety of that particular product, even though it's not aerial spray.
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll try to get you. I know I understand trade secrets, but let's try to get further down the road on that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say something as well?
Absolutely, of course.
Thank you. And that is true that they have not disclosed the inert ingredients in the twist ties yet. So that is very disturbing. And the fact that they have been talking about stopping the aerial spray program is a good step, but they have not mentioned once stopping the ground spray program. And when they can get warrants and force their way on people's properties and spray, which they did in Ojai, it's still a very concerning issue for us. I'm Debbie Friedman, chairperson for MOMAS. And it's time to change the way we manage pests in California. The way it is now and the way it's been for decades, as Dr. Carey discussed with the MedFly, is making our children sick. My son Ben is 10 years old. He's here today with me. Child toxicologists have called children like Ben the canaries in the coal mine. He has serious asthma, eczema, allergies, and a weakened immune system. When doctors, including top specialists, worked with us when he was an infant, most of those doctors told us he was the most sensitive, serious case they'd ever seen of these types of issues. He's had 10 long years of chronic health problems, and his health is seriously impacted by pesticides. When we drive through agricultural areas or stay near golf courses, he breaks out in hives and within a few hours needs his inhaler for his asthma. Those same doctors today have told me that they are now seeing more and more children like then, and they're very concerned about what they're seeing. This is a recent phenomenon. Chronic health problems like FENS are becoming epidemic in our society. We know that babies today are born with more than 200 industrial chemicals in their body, and every day our lives are impacted by these chemicals. And in our home, it impacts our family. I'm unable to return to work full-time. I was a corporate attorney before I had children. And even with insurance, our medical bills are so high, it's equivalent to a second mortgage. So it's time to change the way we do business in this state when it comes to managing pests and using pesticides. Every time we use and spray pesticides, whether it's the ground sprays, whether it's the aerial sprays, and I did notice that they really just said they're stopping the aerial sprays just for the light brown apple moth. They made that very clear that they could do it for the next pest, and I don't think we should let that go by easily. Every time we expose our children to a cloud of pesticides, from the twist ties or sticky goos and bushes full of pesticides, we're exposing our children to chemicals and toxic chemicals in many cases. It's in the air, it ends up in our water, it's in the grass where children play, it's in our food. We're very disturbed that the CDFA has been forcing farmers to spray pesticides on farms, forcing growers to spray, forcing nurseries to spray for this light brown apple moth, which we've heard today is really not the problem that they're making it out to be. Children take in more toxins than adults because of their metabolisms and frequent outdoor play. And they have a harder time expelling toxins because they lack certain enzymes. And I think it's really significant that the majority of health testing for pesticides is done by the pesticide companies themselves. So we are asking, MOMAS is asking the USDA and the CDFA to support our farmers and to help them develop a system that's robust to pests and to minimize pesticide applications, whether it's ground sprays, sticky goos, twist ties, area sprays, or any of these applications, because it's not working. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good point on the spraying, not just this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm Edward Segal. I'm Chief Executive Officer of the Marin County Association of Realtors, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm here on behalf of our 1,500 members to express support for the end of all the efforts to, whether it's control, eradicate, suppress, whatever the word is, stop the program concerning the light brown apple moth. It's important to point out that although I'm speaking here today for the association, in the interest of full disclosure, you should know that I own and live on a 7-acre organic apple orchard in Sonoma County. First, a little brief history. We first got involved in this issue back in 2008. At that time, up until about an hour ago apparently, the state was planning to conduct an aerial campaign to eradicate the moth. As part of the program, airplanes were going to repeatedly spray 9 Northern California cities with pesticide-filled plastic flakes every 30 to 90 days for several years. Our association got so concerned that this aerial spraying would adversely impact the quality of life in Marin that we asked the state to limit the campaign to a ground-based approach. Our realtor members were so concerned that they insisted that we include a warning about the potential for aerial and or ground spraying throughout Marin in our own countywide disclosures form that we asked potential buyers to read and sign. We did as our members asked, and we also added the following language to the form. Quote, the buyer is advised to consult with environmental health specialists and physicians for further information regarding pesticide spraying. Aerial spraying, which today the state announced is no longer an option, is good news and is definitely a step in the right direction. But we share your concerns, Mr. Chairman, that after we're gone, is the state going to go back and implement it? So steps should be taken to ensure that the option will never be an option again, whether it's a light brown apple moth or any other pesticide. If the aerial spraying had continued, or for some reason it kicks back into place into the future, such spraying could have a devastating, harmful effect on an already sluggish real estate market. According to an economic impact report prepared by the California Alliance to Stop the Spray, there could be as much as a 10% drop in home values in the 9 Northern California cities where the spraying was going to take place. So much for the history. Today we are joining with a broad coalition of farmers, businesses, and community groups and organizations to call for the termination of the entire light brown apple moth program. Why? Well, based on what we've heard today and what we've read before, there are simply too many unanswered questions and unresolved issues associated with the program. We would much rather be safe than sorry and hope this committee will feel the same way. Indeed, based on what we've heard from the experts, the program appears to be a solution for a problem that no longer exists. And I must ask the obvious question. If the light brown apple moth, as of about an hour ago, is no longer worthy of eradicating, is it even worth trying to control and suppress? In these challenging, disturbing economic times, the state of California should use its very limited money and precious resources to help address real problems that are much more pressing. We hope the state will do the right thing and end the program now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Roy Upton, I represent Citizens for Health. We have 97,000 members nationwide. As you know from a previous testimony that I provided to this committee, I was a co-collaborator on the development of the reclassification petition. I want to give a little bit of the highlights of that process. USDA took that and reviewed our reclassification petition and denied the reclassification of LBAM at that time. They then sent their response to the National Academy of Science for their independent review. And many people within both the state and the federal legislatures were waiting for this review because they thought that NAS would bring independent science to bear on the issues. But many people have not been made aware of what the findings of the NAS review were, and I'd like to put that on the record. First off, the NAS consensus was that USDA did not fully consider and address the specific arguments calling for the reclassification of LBAM, and neither did they conduct a thorough and balanced analysis supporting the conclusions that were made in the 2 LBAM reclassification petitions that were submitted. But they nevertheless denied the classification or reclassification, even though NAS said that they didn't support that position. 2 is USDA requires more robust science to support its position in denying the reclassification petitions and continuing the LBAM eradication program. They also noted that USDA's biological predictions, which actually formed the very justification for the LBAM eradication program from the beginning, it was described by NAS as problematic and in some cases not based on sound, rigorous science. The Plant Protection Act, which is the law that gives USDA the authority to implement these programs, requires that all decisions be based on sound science. NAS clearly said that this was not the case. NAS also reviewed unpublished genetic data that USDA APHIS had and noted that due to the genetic diversity of LBAM that's being found in California, that there couldn't be these populations just popping up from single introductions as alleged by USDA and CDA. Or that it is highly unlikely that LBAM was a new introduction to California. This is the NAS, not us. They also noted that USDA's assertions that trapping data suggest that populations are progressively increasing, they described as misleading, because as increasing numbers can also mean that trapping is only becoming more efficient and more prevalent. They noted that LBAM has adapted to, that USDA has alleged that LBAM has adapted to new host plants. And that's where they say there'll be potential damage to 2,300 different plants. In NAS's review, this should be omitted from their reports because those arguments are not well-founded. The scientific literature reports on no more than 250 plants that may be impacted by LBAM, and most of those, 99% of those plants, are actually common weeds and no economic or little economic significance. The NAS committee also expressed substantial concerns regarding the economic component of USDA's justification for the LBAM program, based primarily on what they said was the ambiguous foundation of the analysis for the predicted geographic distribution of LBAM and the inconsistent and sometimes incomprehensible analytical techniques used, and further noted that they provided no source to substantiate the projections for damage, the estimates used for damage. NAS also noted that USDA did not consider other potentially realistic scenarios by which LBAM could be cost-effectively managed, and considered USDA's projections for crop damage to be quote-unquote unlikely. Lastly, they noted that USDA implied that the previous literature provided evidence that the potential for environmental damage to trees and native flora was substantial. NAS agreed with our reclassification petition in noting that the scientific literature does not support that LBAM is a significant threat to trees and native flora, and this is continuing to be alleged by USDA. I believe that this is the type of information that needs to get across to the state and federal legislature, because this was a review by NAS that was commissioned by USDA, not by us, and really is probably the reason why the EIR reads as it is today. Senator Florez, you asked a couple of questions about trading to Canada and Mexico. The answer was that in order for LBAM or for crops to go into Canada and Mexico, that they needed to be treated. When they're treated, that means they're treated for all pests, not just LBAM. So whether LBAM is there or not doesn't matter, they need to be treated. New Zealand is able to trade worldwide in meeting very strict LBAM-free restrictions in countries all over the world. The U.S. can do the same. And Canada and Mexico originally only had LBAM restrictions to harmonize with the U.S. to maintain access to U.S. markets, not independent of LBAM itself or because of a biological threat of LBAM. And you also asked about eradication, whether or not it was 100%. The manner in which eradication is defined by CDFA and USDA is more political than biological. In the scientific literature, eradication is 100% destruction of the population so that they can't repopulate in a specific area. That is not how CDFA and USDA defined eradication, but that is how eradication is basically defined in the entomology literature. This has to become an agricultural issue, not a community issue, and I think that's the message that I want to leave, and I think that's the message that MOMAS has just brought as well, is that this is a crop quality issue. This is managed as a crop quality issue worldwide, where LBAM is endemic and has been naturalized for more than 100 years, and this is how we have to do it today and not allow these programs to come into our backyards and our communities. Thank you.
I'm Daniel Harder. Appreciate the opportunity to provide public comment. I was a panelist at a previous engagement here, and my experiences have been from the beginning of this issue, and I've maintained from that beginning that eradication is not possible and eradication is not necessary. I'm glad to see that CDFA has recognized that eradication is not possible. I would like to just provide a variety of comments here. Professor Gutierrez's comments about CDFA not respecting the science. I'm a PhD scientist in botany. I know the science. I investigated all the references prior to developing the petition. I'm a co-author on the petition to reclassify the lifeline MOMAS with Roy Upton and others. And worse, CDFA rewrites the science to fulfill the conclusions that are necessary for their own documentation. And I point to, in fact, an internal memo that was circulated by Robert Dahl of CDFA showing that there would be increased pesticide use by people if nothing was done to affect the populations of LBAM. Well, it's great to write your own papers, but when they're peer-reviewed and torn down because they're not based on real science or precedent for it, that's fine. And I spent a considerable amount of time last time giving comment about that. Since eradication is recognized as not being obtainable or a realistic goal, there really is no reason to implement control methodologies outside of agriculture. And I strongly agree with Roy Upton's previous comment that this needs to be an agricultural issue exclusively. There is no reason to involve any public citizen, any public lands, any other area outside of ag production to control light brown apple moth in this movement, even in control and suppression. There's also a fear factor among, and we pointed earlier about why farmers weren't here. I also would like to say why there aren't many scientists here. You know, entomologists get a lot of money from CDFA to do work on pests that are of economic importance. Not a lot of LBAM work has been done because we realized early on internationally, not a lot of work has been done in LBAM recently, because once they figured out what was going on with LBAM, when you spray with broad-spectrum pesticides, you kill the things that eat it, and now you have a problem with LBAM. That's been shown in the literature over and all. And so there is a fear factor of scientists and entomologists losing their funding from CDFA if they make a stand on this. And being naive at the beginning, I'm quite experienced now to understand why. With the new goal of control, not eradication, and the basis for the development of the EIR and the process was all based on eradication. Everything is on eradication as a goal. Now that there's a completely different set of circumstances for developing EIR, isn't a new EIR necessary to be developed with its new conditions? Because, for instance, in that EIR, the original draft EIR, they talked about integrated pest management as a tool. Well, they said, we're not going to consider that here in this EIR because integrated pest management has a goal of not eradicating but controlling it. So we're not even going to consider it. Well, is IPM now reconsidered in this final between the draft and the final? Has it been all reconsidered and re-emphasized? Because IPM and Kevin Nixon, the state entomologist, told me when I submitted my report from New Zealand, I spent weeks in New Zealand and reported on what I found from scientists there about light brown apple moth, how they handle it. He said, this report that you produced would be great if we were going to control this thing. But we want eradication, so what this report is worth nothing to us. So it'd be great for them to revisit IPM seriously. And I really believe the new EIR, this EIR needs to be thrown out and a new one produced. Despite what CDFA has said and stands by, it is likely, when closely evaluated, that no pest has been completely eradicated. And this is something that Jim Carey has re-emphasized over and over again. I also want to remind and put this on the record that before the introduction of the aerial spraying, there was not a single efficacy trial or treatment for efficacy against the light brown apple moth and its control before it was sprayed on people. And the same is true for the twist ties. The twist ties will not work in urban areas, mixed forests, mixed areas. They are made and designed for agricultural systems exclusively. There is no testing on humans of the pheromone at the levels they're talking about in these communities. In schools, next to schools, they oversprayed 3 miles. They had trouble with the emitters when they were spraying in the air. Some areas got double, triple treatments. What about those areas? Those places are enhanced pheromone concentrations. How are they going to make sure over 18 counties, or let's say just 2 counties, how are they going to make sure that that pheromone is the exact concentration they need to be most efficacious for light brown apple moth when you've got hills, canyons, offshore breezes, onshore breezes, all that stuff happening? How could it be? I mean, there is no way. And I did want to correct one statement by Dr. Dahl that there are very few predators in California that eat the light brown apple moth. A UC researcher, Nicholas Mills, studied the light brown apple moth. His expertise is natural predators to insects. He showed that not less than 13 predators exist in California that eat light brown apple moth.
Parasitoids, direct parasitoids.
Okay, parasitoids and predators. Okay, the same thing for controlling. They're used in the same way for controlling the insects. So they're not only a few; there are many. And Nick Mills made the point of emphasizing that there is an enhancement of parasitoids and predators that affect light brown apple moth beyond what's actually controlling the native moths in California. Thank you very much.